Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Nicola Scott is the incredible artist who works on iconic characters such as Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. She also worked with Kelly Sue DeConnick on Volume 3 of the Eisner Award-winning series, Wonder Woman HISTORIA. In addition, she collaborates with my dear friend, Greg Rucka, on Black Magick. You've heard of that guy, right? If not, there are about 55 episodes for you to check out. It was fascinating to hear Nicola do a deep dive on Wonder Woman HISTORIA. I could have continued listening to her for hours on the education of the mythos and the intent behind the story. Spoiler alert, we go into a lot of detail about all 3 volumes. So if you haven't read it yet, shame actually, you should have already read that. But I forgive you because I know you're going to get on to reading it right now. It's absolutely mind-bending and incredible. In addition to Wonder Woman HISTORIA, Nicola discusses her artistic process, and I am amazed at the amount of gravity and energy behind everything she does. If you haven't seen Nicola's work, you can check out Wonder Woman HISTORIA, Black Magick, or her ongoing DC monthly Titans. I am honored to share in these conversations with guests like Nicola and hope you enjoyed listening. If you do, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Nicola. I can't believe I'm actually talking to you.
Hi, Mimi. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, well, it is a pleasure, but also my honor. And it feels like I've been leading up to this for quite a while. There's several reasons.
Oh, gosh.
And one is, of course, huge fan of your work. So forgive my fangirling out. But obviously, we have a few links to us, one being Mr. Greg Rucka.
Of course.
Of course. And I have to say it was really fun. And I hope you don't mind me sharing. And when I emailed you, you're like, oh, yeah, I noticed he was, kind of on your podcast all the time. Like he had just moved in. And I thought that was just hilarious.
Pretty much.
And it is true. But I will say, Greg and I haven't really spoken that much this year. We've been kind of not catching up on our schedule. So we are overdue for a chat. But it's been nice that I've been able to keep the conversations going elsewhere.
Yeah, he's been a busy bee. In fact, I just had an email exchange with him yesterday for the first time in months. And I think he's coming up for air soon.
Yes.
One only hopes.
Yes, exactly. I'm grateful. He always texts me back, and I got to preview The Forged, which is exciting and fantastic. But yeah, he's a busy bee, as are you. And our second connectivity here is that you were on the same email thread as I was, where I came up with this pretty much ulterior motive plan to just get together with all the creators of Wonder Woman HISTORIA in one room, because I selfishly would like to do that. And it's actually going to happen, which is
it's actually going to happen. It is amazing. Thank you for the idea for sort of sending that out into the universe and in a way that can actually facilitate the reality of it happening.
Yes.
Because, you're not the only one that wants this. All of us want it as well. I don't know that Jean and I have met before, but I've certainly met Kelly Sue a number of times and Phil a number of times over the last, 20 years.
Yeah.
But for us all to sort of be together about this one specific, really formative project that I do think will end up having a really infinite shelf life.
Agreed.
It's a story that I think has meant quite a bit more to us in reality than it did in concept.
Wow.
Even in concept, it sort of charged all of those creative instincts, and it was very exciting conceptually. But the reality of how it's turned out, the doing of it and the finished product of it, and the sort of complex thought that went into every moment of it. I don't know that I've I've sort of had that many opportunities to deep dive. Obviously, you know, when Greg and I have worked on Wonder Woman, we spent a decade talking about her before we worked together on it.
Yeah.
And also, you know, when we work on Black Magick, there's a it's very personal, as well as sort of incredibly collaborative. But this was a project that, Historia was a project that kind of sparked from Kelly Sue. And Phil is, I'm not sure if you've spoken to Phil, but Phil is
yes.
sort of, he thinks about things in a sort of more, I want to say sophisticated and complicated way, but he's a more thoroughly articulate. You know, he really wants to articulate his thoughts on Wonder Woman lore and mythos and religion and all this kind of stuff. For me, I love the conversation about it, but I feel more instinctive and less articulate about it. I feel like I know, I feel like my instincts know the right way to go, but I'm not always as thorough as Phil at articulating it. So when they get to sort of, when Kelly Sue and Phil get together and they sort of germinated the original issue, you know, having had Kelly Sue already sort of come up with the concept.
Yeah.
I think that really fed into the richness of Kelly Sue's goal. And it's become this project that I think we're all sort of incredibly proud of, obviously, because it's a beautiful work. But I feel like it might end up defining the future of the Wonder Woman mythos that hasn't been really fully examined before at any length. Because anytime the history of the Amazons have been told, it's always a shorthand to get us to Diana and to Wonder Woman as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And in this, you know, she is not at all an afterthought. She is absolutely the goal of the story. You know, if you frame Hera as the antagonist of the story, she knows where this is going, but she also understands the slow, methodical shifting of the chessboard required to get there. And that's what this story is about. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful in every way. It's also one of those that you have to just keep rereading to really just capture all of it, not just from an artistic standpoint, but it's so fascinating what Kelly Sue has been able to do with, you know, my husband said, you know, those first few pages is just like a few words, but they're so impacting. You have to actually keep rereading that because you're like, wow, she says so much with just a few words, right? Like there's just so much there. Yeah. And then there's the art. And I've had Phil on the show actually a few times, and we are like soulmates. Like we talk social justice, right. We talk fashion, we like it's fantastic. And when I heard Kelly Sue mention that Phil would send like different outfits and shoes to choose from for the characters, I was like, oh, I must talk to him. Like, we need to talk immediately. Give me his number. So and so he kicks this off. And then, you know, Jean and I had spoken before Wonder Woman, but recently actually. And then this was the missing piece of the puzzle where I started the email thread, and I'm like, and Kelly says, you know, she's spoken to almost all of the Wonder Woman creators. I'm like, and I must fix this now because I'm a real checklist kind of person. And so like, Nicola, hello, we need to get on this. But for many reasons other than that, like I've been so excited to talk to you because, you know, Jean does this amazing, like so much like symbolism in there, and there's faces in the trees and all of this. And then you bring it home in volume 3 and you're just like, okay, it's just sensory overload between all 3 volumes. And you guys, it's so gorgeous. I can't ever explain it to people because they're like, oh, it's a Wonder Woman book. I'm like, no. Yeah, it's not a Wonder Woman book. It's called Wonder Woman Historia, but it's not. I'm like, it's an Amazon woman book. It is. It's
100%. Yeah.
You have never seen the Amazons like this. And when Kelly Sue explained, like, she saw the Amazons in a certain way always in her head, or how she envisioned and what she had researched. And you all brought it to life so well. I mean, and that last volume, I'm just like, it's just so amazing. And I'm so thrilled, one, to be able to have these conversations with all of you. And of course, so that we can have our reunion and meet up in Portland. Like, super excited about that.
I know, it's thrilling.
I can't even believe it. Like, it's surreal. But you're right. It's part of this legacy of something really special that will forever change how I think people see her, because not that people saw her negatively, because obviously she's everyone's heroine. I know she's one of your favorites for like ever, just like me. Like,
absolutely the top of my favorites.
Had the boots, the Linda from the TV show, right? Like that was our era, and like. So, but then now we're getting this other dimension, this other side that hasn't been explored, and it's so exciting to go on this ride with you all. And it's super impacting. And as I consider myself a feminist, so as someone who really these themes really speak to me, and really is so meaningful. So yes, thank you for the work, and also super excited, just really excited to talk about it. Yeah. So. When did Kelly Sue actually approach you to work on volume 3? Because I know Gene's like, we worked over the pandemic, and that's why he said he had never met her in person. I'm like, we must change this. But you guys, knew each other already.
Yeah. I didn't know about the project until, I'd heard rumblings about it, I think probably through Greg, when the Black Label thing was in development. The whole sort of Black Label banner was in development. And I think because anytime there is any kind of banner in development at DC, he is one of the people considered to do a Wonder Woman project under that banner. And I think in passing, he had mentioned that he wasn't doing anything with Black Label because it was not that long. I don't know that there was any overlap, but it wasn't that long after he was finishing his recent run that started with Liam and I think ended with Liam and Bilquis. And he said, no, Kelly Sue's doing a project with Phil. And it was like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. But that was about as much information as I had, because it was like, I haven't seen Kelly Sue's take on the Wonder Woman space before, the Wonder Woman lore, and having Phil come back to it after, nearly 20 years off from the character, it'd be sort of really interesting to see how that will have developed.
Right.
And then the announcement came out and it was like, oh, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. Who knows what the story is about, because the art that they released was of Wonder Woman. And the project was called very long-windedly Historia, Wonder Woman, the Amazons, or something. It was sort of included Wonder Woman in there, Wonder Woman, Historia, the Amazons. And Phil sort of would show a couple of like pieces here and there as it was coming out. And it was kind of during the lead up to the first issue coming out. Is that even right? No, I think it was probably quite a few months before it was coming out, like maybe even 6 months. I got an email from the editor of the book saying, this is how the project is rolling. Yeah. It looks like we're going to be using a different artist for each volume. And then if we get to sort of do the next lot, we'll sort of continue that cycle of artists, because it's quite a dense project. And would I be interested in doing volume 2? And I was like, oh, look, it sounds amazing. I would love to be part of that project. But I think at the time, Greg and I had just started volume 3 of Black Magick. Mm-hmm. And it was just, really bad timing. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of a little bit relieved to be able to say no, because it was like, oh, God, I don't know that I want to follow Phil on this project, because I know whatever he's bringing to the table is going to be so much. And I don't know that I want to follow that. That's overwhelming. Fuck. And so I sort of was more intrigued by what the project was.
Yeah.
But also a little bit relieved that I was in a position to say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't. And so that was that. And then about 6 months later, and they had secured Jean. And I don't know where Jean was at in the process, but I think this might have still been before Volume 1 came out.
Right.
The editor circled back to me and said, just circling back, we're now sort of planning for Volume 3.
Right.
How about Volume 3? And again, it was just bad timing. I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. I wish, but I can't fit it in. I can't see where I can fit it in because I could sort of see the next 18 months worth of work scheduled out ahead of me. And it was just like, oh man, I wish I could, but I can't. And so that was that. And I was sort of a bit intrigued because it's like, okay, I know Phil's work and I know Jean's work and they're so different from each other. Now I'm really intrigued. What the fuck is this story? And then where were we at? No, I think Volume 1 still hadn't come out. And it was like 6 months after the first ask for Volume 3. The editor circled back and said, look, I know you're probably going to say no, but we're still looking for an artist. I just thought I'd double check.
Right.
And at this point I was like, actually, you know what? I think it was like February 21. And I was like, look, I can't start anything now, but if it can wait until like August, I can start in August. And he was like, perfect timing. And I was like, oh my God, really? And he was like, yes. And I was like, okay, great. So at that point I was on board. I think Volume 1 was like about to be released or had just come out.
Yeah.
I know they sent me a copy, so I think it must have been round about that window. And Jean had a fair amount of it in the can as well. And I was sort of like 6 months away. Oh no, man, I'm getting all of my timeline wrong.
Oh, don't worry about it.
I talked with Kelly Sue about it. We'd had a couple of sort of long form Skypes about it, and it sounded really fascinating. I was starting to see bits and pieces of their work, and it was really becoming clear from what I was seeing and what Kelly Sue was sort of filling me in on was that the Volume 1 was primarily sort of God space, infinite detail, double page spread storytelling.
Yeah.
That is like perfect for Phil, also perfect for the level of story that they're telling. Because when you read Volume 1, it is almost entirely the gods and their shenanigans until like the last quarter of the book, and it suddenly drops down to earth and we meet Hippolyta and we start her journey. And it's so dense and so overwhelming, and it is so saturated and full of information, and that sort of world building. And I can't even say world building. It's not enough. It's this sort of Pantheon universe building that Phil insinuates into this story that Kelly Sue has provided the structure for and the direction of, was so full on. But then to see it contrasted with Jean's story, which is almost entirely earthbound and quite a sort of focused story on Hippolyta. It's sort of that introduction that Phil starts with, where even though he sort of narrows it down to Earth and Hippolyta, it still has a very the beginning of an Odyssey feel to it. especially the sort of insinuation that her big emotional crime, that she's feeling her guilt, the thing that sort of perpetuates her that initiates her journey, and her sort of feeling of fuck, I've done something wrong, never again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Her chasing after that, and her feeling of guilt and shame and loss looks like it takes place over a long period of time and a long distance traveled. And it's gobsmacking and heartbreaking. And so it sort of has an otherworldly feel to it. And even though I've read that volume, I can't tell you how many times, that sequence always overwhelms me, even though visually it's a lot easier to take in than every page that's preceded it. It's so emotionally overwhelming because of everything that's come before it. And that sort of sense of Hippolyta's purpose, the vacancy of her purpose.
Yeah.
But that vacancy being so defined that when she finds the thing to fill it with, which is essentially Jean's story, it's so focused. And so Jean's story being sort of almost entirely earthbound, and again, travels over a long period of time and a long distance, as Hippolyta sort of fills that void, fills that vacancy. Reading those two volumes as a whole, but also their separate stories, is in itself quite profound because of how Jean approaches the sort of earthbound Amazon's perception of the gods, that they're these ephemeral beings who are constantly present, as opposed to Phil's version, which is in their realm from their perspective, and the majesty and grandeur and overwhelming infinite of it all.
Yeah, the up in the clouds version versus like, no, they're with us at all times.
This sort of, that scene that Jean has with Hippolyta and Artemis, where in every panel, Artemis is an animal, a shadow, a tree, herself. She's constantly this ephemeral figure, but is very clearly present for Hippolyta in this moment, in a way that she hasn't even been to the Amazons that she created, is so sort of telling of the uniqueness that Hippolyta is bringing into this story. Her personal agenda is so strong that she's summoned a god to her presence, is so beautiful, and demanded recognition, and then goes on to demand that from these goddess-born Amazons, is this sort of really grounded, even though I'm saying all of these, bizarre esoteric things, it's so sort of grounded and tangible and real and human that I knew before I even started, before I even got the first script, a piece of script for Volume 3, I knew that Volume 3 would have to bridge the gap between those two, because I kind of knew instinctively, but also in sort of how Kelly Sue and I had talked around it, because we were talking ideas rather than specifics up until the script arrived. I knew that my volume would have to jump between realms constantly, while also escalating towards this climactic point. And so it's just sort of like, okay, look, Phil has been the natural inheritor of George Perez's mantle. And I'm like the understudy. When Phil isn't available, they bring in me.
I don't know about that.
Kind of thing. Well, it's sort of,
right.
in a practical sense,
Yes, but he for sure
how
has
the
a
work
very
dictates.
special relationship, and also been mentored by
100%.
100%.
I feel very much the understudy to Phil's inheritance of the mantle. And so sort of knowing that I can sort of not really do what Phil does, but I know that I can bring something to that arena and I can speak of it because my influences are very similar to Phil's influences.
Mm-hmm.
And, he will articulate all of this stuff a lot more than I will. I'm way more instinctive than I am verbal. But whenever we have a conversation on, any kind of vaguely Wonder Woman related subject, we're very much simpatico. And then sort of finding that sort of really nuanced human side of the storytelling, which I feel is instinctive to me, it's the kind of storytelling that I love to do, that sort of really complicated, subversive, sometimes multi-layered emotional stakes of characters is a thing that is of interest and importance to me. Whether or not I successfully convey it all the time, I don't know. But I know that, a lot of the stuff that I attempt to do is subtle, and I feel generally like I achieve the goal. Sort of finding that sort of way to bring in these sort of big, sort of grand scale elements and these really quiet, intimate moments, because it is in my volume that Hippolyta's agenda is really galvanized, and it's galvanized because suddenly it's being questioned and it's under attack, literally. And so sort of bridging those two very different approaches to storytelling and these two very different approaches to this particular story felt like a big part of the job. And because both of them had introduced so many interesting elements, it was like, okay, I need to find my way into delivering on these elements as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you almost always hit it out of the park. I've never seen otherwise. And that it really comes through. And of course, I haven't read every single thing, but for sure, Black Magick, like the word subtle that you use is perfect, because that whole concept of so much with so little, right? You don't have to be so elaborate all the time. Like in Black Magick, it's very concentrated. There's a lot in what the character's doing with their emotion, or what they're saying, and how their hand position is, or whatever. It's always, you can tell the collaboration process on anything I've read and seen your work with is spot on. But with this one in particular, like you said, it was literally bridging the gap, but two very different artists, right? And then you're now okay, I'm going to bring it all home. And it's how do we make that work? And I'm normally a bit of a grumpy reader when it's oh, they just changed the artist, or oh, they just changed the writer, and it feels disconnected. But this is just exciting, because, well, one, it's we've got the dream cast here, so you're really coming in with okay, no, we definitely want more of all of this, but it all doesn't feel that way. It just feels perfectly together. And Jean actually mentioned, I wish I had seen Phil's thing before. I would have had her in a different outfit had I known.
Right.
Would have been nice, but oh well, it's done, because like you said, the timeline. But I feel like it works because, like you said, on the first one, it's this godly, very thing, and then Jean's feels very earthly, and that feeling does change, but it does put you there. And then yours, that jumping back and forth, and we're getting the battles, and we're getting a lot of violence, and it's so incredible, and I love your whole dissection of it. So thank you for that. That was really
that's a pleasure. Really look, I really can talk about this project all day because there is so much to say. We were working on it for such a long time. Like you know that Phil's took a really long time, and you can see why. It's not a surprise when you see the finished product.
Yes.
But like even Jean's and my volumes, they took a really long time because it is a very dense text. And I don't mean that the script is dense. I mean that there is so much. There's so much meaning in everything that you want to sort of fully mine it. And like there's all kinds of things that are in there that I'm not 100% sure that readers have necessarily picked up on, but that's okay because it doesn't need to sort of, flash its signs at you because it's not that kind of storytelling. We just wanted to make sure that all of these sort of points were hit, these elements are there so that, the people who do recognize a particular moment for what it is, it's for them.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the beauty of it, right? Because every panel speaks to everyone differently, and what you get from it is completely different. I have to point out that, I'm sure you know by now, I am a Kung Fu teacher, and I've been doing this my whole life. It's my father's legacy, etc. But our main style is the praying mantis. And so in your volume, I mean, I was super excited, first of all, to see that there was a praying mantis, and then that it kind of followed along on a few pages. Like we got to see the praying mantis still there, like at the bottom. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Cause as nature science viewers of TV know, like the female basically eats the male, and that it's very predatory. But yeah, that was really exciting. And I don't know that everybody else would have been as excited to see the praying mantis as I particularly was, but that's a perfect example.
Yeah, well, there is all kinds of elements like that kind of spotted throughout that are of intention. Like there is a scene that Kelly Sue and I workshopped to get exactly right. It's the scene in the morning of the last battle, and it starts with the men's army or the God's army marching towards the Amazons, and they have, new weapons. They have Hephaestus with them. They have a Cyclops with them. They have a Minotaur with them, and they are regimentally marching towards battle. And then we jump cut to the Amazons, and they're enjoying some breakfast theater because what they're doing, what the seventh tribe is really all about, is the community that they're building. And all of these goddess-born Amazons that sort of drop in on this ever-growing seventh tribe they've all consolidated here. This is sort of base camp, but it's also the beginnings of their society and their essentially community. And it's subtle, but it is clear in the text that the women have never seen theatre before, and they've never participated in theatre before because women weren't allowed. And so the two actors that are sort of part of the performance that morning, they're both trans characters. And so they're there to sort of, here's what we can bring our community. And it is very much the sort of that moment of Hippolyta saying to Callicrates, stop sounding so dramatic with, it's all going to end. What if we win? What if we're still here? I'm determined at all costs that we're going to get through this one way or another. And then think of what you can do for us by bringing us an art form that we don't, that these goddess-born Amazons have never experienced because they're all about war, that these earthbound, new human Amazons have never experienced because they've been slaves and have not been entitled to art of this variety. And you can do this for us. You can bring this to our community to enrich it. You have a purpose here. Start fucking planning for the future, goddammit, because we're going to have one way or another. And it's sort of, it feeds into sort of Hippolyta's determination that, everyone else is feeling kind of fatalistic. And Hippolyta is just like, fuck that. I've already gone over the other side. I've done the fatalistic thing and I've come out the other side, and now I'm just going to goddamn take this life by the fucking balls and squeeze and just get out of my way because I'm going to make it happen. And in turn, that becomes one of the chess pieces that Hera gets to use to sort of call to what's his name and say, you've got a couple of actors down here. Protect them. It's your job.
Yep.
They pray to you. They them performing their art is in service to you. Do something for them. Right. And it's a sort of really intrinsic moment where he becomes sort of part of the machinations that get us to our final result.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see also just in general what Diana is really going to look like, because you get to draw the first moment of Diana that we see in this volume. And what's really striking to me is how you all have undone any preconceived notion of what an Amazon looks like in my head or what a goddess looks like in my head.
Right.
And I think for the better. I think it's just brought so much life and so much diversity and so much depth to all these characters. And so I'm really excited to see, okay, what is she actually going to look like? Because there is the Wonder Woman we all immediately, what you think of. And I'm sure there will be notes of that, but I'm really excited to kind of see what the adult version of Diana is going to be. Because we finally get to see her at the end as a babe. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what that's like, because you've really been able to kind of reimagine all of this. Like, this is all reimagined for me. Like it's like meeting her again for the first time kind of thing, which is so exciting.
Well, yeah, because one of the major things that Kelly Sue has done is totally recontextualize the island. Up until this point, the island has been either a reward for the Amazons, a prize, or a refuge or something. And now it is a gilded cage.
Yes.
And I don't know if it was her or Phil that came up with the idea that if Apollo was the warden, that it would be daylight all the time, except for one night a month, that it would be for Artemis. And so, we've got at least 3 volumes on the island, possibly even 6, because I don't actually know, the full progression of these sort of, and whether or not they'll get to do them. But seeing how much and how sophisticated those first 3 volumes are in their storytelling and their world building, I'm really curious to see the next 3 volumes of how the society on this island becomes more familiar to what we know of it and how it is different from from how we understand it. Because now with this recontextualization, especially now that sort of Hippolyta has essentially been abandoned by the rest of her people, at some point we know she's going to be the queen. At some point, the other Amazons are going to find out that Hippolyta has a miracle baby.
Yeah.
she doesn't know where the baby came from, but she knows that it's connected to her original sin.
Right.
And it is essentially, I think she can kind of instinctively know that this is a gift from the gods. One way or another, that's absolutely how she will be interpreted, Diana. And she's been gifted to Hippolyta, you know, as a you've done so much work. Mm-hmm. The work's not over yet, but you know, the work now will come with love and community and safety, because, you know, while yes, you're in a prison, at least you're for the most part safe here.
Right.
And seeing how that story develops, I'm fascinated to see.
Yes, as am I. As am I. Can't wait to talk about it more. And I'm curious because I know you've done so many different comic characters, Batman, Wonder Woman, and the Teen Titans and everything. But I read that you have a theater and costume design background. And so I'm curious if this project in particular was super exciting, or have you done other projects? Because apologies if I don't have it all in my head, but where you really get to kind of explore that, like meld those two worlds, I guess.
Well, I have to say the job of being an artist in comics from the very beginning, it surprised me how much of those theater skills I've employed. Because I went to a performing arts high school and majored in acting, and all of my training after school was in acting, and all of my work experience up until my late 20s, apart from working in hospitality like most actors do, was in acting. And because I could sew and because I could draw in sort of smaller productions, I was often, you know, also tasked with making costumes, designing costumes, making sets, painting sets, you know, working in film, in sort of independent film. I was often sort of doing production design and costume design, as well as, you know, wearing some actor hats and this, that, and the other. So all of those skills are sort of really entrenched in me, that sort of instinct has been really entrenched in me. And comics are essentially doing those jobs. You know, I get to act all of the characters. I get to cast them too, but I also get to design the spaces that they're in. I get to kind of direct a scene a little bit in terms of, you know, blocking out a scene and where all the characters are in relation to each other. And then, you know, it's understanding a three-dimensional space and then populating it with, you know, set dressing, actors, important props, all of that kind of stuff is so sort of built into my training that it makes perfect sense to me when I'm drawing a scene to explore them from that understanding. Right. And so it took a little while for me to realize, oh my God, I'm just doing all of the things that I know instinctively how to do
on the page.
But I get to do all of them all at once, two-dimensionally. Right. And so, you know, some jobs it's sort of more obvious than others. You know, Black Magick is very profoundly, you know, all of those skills. I find the smaller, more intimate the story, or sort of certainly the more intimate the story, and personal the story, the more those skills come into play. But you know, when you're sort of doing big, grand scale things, your concerns are elsewhere. You know, I still want to sort of understand the space that I'm in, and right. I still want to make sure that space is understandable to the reader. You know, when I started on volume 3 of Historia, I knew that the sort of initial setting for my Amazon scenes would be this space that Jean had created. And Jean had sort of set up a bunch of sort of, in different scenes, sort of little vignettes of here's this space which looks like an abandoned temple. Here's a space that looks like an abandoned building. Here's a space by the water that might have been a dock at some point. And so I'm like, okay, all of these spaces are related somehow, but we haven't yet seen how they're related. So at some point I need to show their relation to each other, and then hopefully have some moments to visit some of these spaces myself, to sort of continue on with the designs that Jean has given me, but also define them a little more fully. And luckily I had a scene right at the beginning where a couple of Amazons are watching the sunrise and, actually being able to see the sunrise for the first time. And I was like, oh, if I'm up high, like on a cliff face, I can kind of, instead of just looking out at the horizon, I can show the whole 7th tribe Amazon village on the ground below me, including the water and the hills and I can sort of map where everything is and show the readers that, all of these things are within walking distance of each other. They were all, this closely related to each other, because clearly once upon a time, this was a village. This was a town. This was a something that has been abandoned at some point. So there's not a lot of detail there because this isn't a modern space. This is, in ancient Greece, already an ancient space.
Yeah.
So it's got to be at least a few hundred years old. And then sort of luckily, because, Kelly Sue's concern is with the sort of the rolling sense of dread and the dialogue and the scenes and the blah, blah, blah. She's not really sort of saying where any of the scenes are set. She's just like, the Amazons are having a funeral. And the Amazon, the battle is taking place and, but she's not telling me where any of these things are happening. And so it's kind of up to me how to set these scenes, where to set these scenes.
Right.
And luckily I got to sort of say, okay, well, here is the primary sort of community space. It's a couple of old temples or whatever that face each other. Mm-hmm. This is a space that is like their town square, essentially. And so we will revisit this anytime everyone's all together. When they're having a funeral, it's like, how about I do it down by the water, because we haven't been down there. And I would like to sort of show that space that Jean has shown, but recontextualize it. And it's an appropriate place for them to have their emotional religious ceremony. Mm-hmm. And then in the first battle, I sort of actively made it clear that they were in a esoteric, well, not an esoteric space, but in a unformed space. The first battle, because it was kind of taking place in the shadow of a confrontation between Zeus and Hera. Mm. And so in my mind, I was thinking, if this was a movie, there would be no audio for the battle. It would be silent, because really the primary conflict here is about Zeus and Hera.
Yeah.
And the sound would snap in at the moment where Hippolyta kind of engages emotionally in the story, and suddenly we're there with her as a loved one has fallen. And so it becomes real. And so sort of finding visual ways to sort of indicate that meant, okay, I'm not going to give this a setting. I'm going to make it feel sort of Lord of the Rings could be anywhere. It's a battlefield somewhere, but who gives a shit? Where in the final battle, I wanted it to be really clear that they were in their forecourt, that this were their spaces that were absolutely getting decimated, that there's no coming back from this. Mm-hmm. And so, sort of having had the opportunity by this point to really properly establish the visual cues of the where they are, and sort of constantly referencing, because when I'm referencing Jean's art to sort of get myself started and work out the map of where everything is. Yeah. And then I'm constantly referencing everything that I've drawn up to this point to make sure that all my angles match up. And it's this is where I get ridiculous, because once I've created a space, you know, when I'm working on Black Magick,
this is
I'm
your film.
really big on
This is your film background coming in. Like, did you take the Polaroids
100%. No, because I've got the art right there.
Yes, that's
and,
right.
You know, I find the same thing with Black Magick. It's like if I'm designing a new space, I'm like, oh, I get to design a new space. You know, how do I want this to look? And, you know, if we're in Rowan's house, which, you know, a decent part of the book is set in Rowan's house, you know, I wanted to feel really lived in and generational and eclectic and collected and all that kind of stuff. So I'm densely packing these spaces. And then Greg will like write another scene in this space. And I'm like, oh, fuck, now I have to draw it again. Holy shit. Oh, God damn it. And so there's that. But sometimes it's sort of like, this scene I've decided will take place in the breakfast nook that's kind of beyond the kitchen. So I'm getting to create a new space. If I have to draw that again, I'm going to kill myself because there's a stained glass window behind it all that's so intricate. And
I love it. I love it. I don't know that your writers know that about you, that you've like, you're doing all this creation. They're like, haha, I'm going to set another scene there. I don't know. Now that Greg's heard this, he was like,
yeah, I'm pretty sure at one point I said to Greg, if we ever see that murder wall again, and it's not front on, the murder wall that Alex has been creating in her attic, it's like, if I have to draw that again, I'm going to kill somebody because it's so densely packed now. It's like I either have to show it flat because I made sure that when I did show the sort of full scope of it, I showed it flat so that I can Photoshop it in at different sizes. But, you know, if it goes too small, then it starts looking like it's been Photoshopped in. I don't like the look of that. So it's like, please don't let me go there again, please. Please.
Oh my God,
but, you know, I'd love to be in Alex's bathroom again. I only got to do one page of that scene and, you know, creating her bathroom. Let's
call Greg right now. I mean, it's 5 o'clock his time. He's awake. I'm sure right. This is really important that we really need to let him know that the bathroom scene must reappear because she's only drawn it once, everybody.
Well, we haven't been in Rowan's bathroom yet, and I don't quite know what it will be, but it'll be fun to draw if and when that scene happens.
I love it. I'm just in awe of the detail and the amount that goes through your head for one small moment on a page. Like, it's so fascinating. Like, we all know it takes so long. We all know, because Greg always tells me, I can just write my stuff. And it is challenging, don't get me wrong, but he always says, for you and then for Michael, he goes, but then that takes forever. He's like, for them to do one page is a lot different than me, typing a page out. So he's always so empathetic to the process that you all go through. But when I really hear, the rabbit holes that you go down and go through and then find your way through. And I love the film and theater background because that speaks to me. I have a background in that as well. And so it makes so much sense, but I could never imagine drawing anything, mind you, but love that you're able to kind of put that all kind of together. And earlier you had mentioned something about like, my 18-month schedule looks like this. And I mean, is that just typical for you? Like, you're going to be living with this project for probably a pretty long time. I mean, that's pretty intense.
Pretty much. Like, it's not always the case. Like when I'm on a monthly book at DC Comics, I know, I either know I'm on it indefinitely or I know kind of when I'm planning on ending.
Yeah.
But certainly when I'm not on a monthly book, I'm trying to sort of work out at least the next 9 months worth. So I've got an idea of how to sort of stack the work. I'm pretty good at my own time management, and I find that I'm sort of very front foot at letting editors and such know this is when I'll be doing this particular project, and this is when you can expect it by. Or I'm not going to get to this little project until this window. And if you can send me a reminder about it, don't worry about hassling me because I know what my schedule is. I just don't want you to forget as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty good at that kind of thing, but it does blow out. Like, when I agreed to do Historia, I sort of knew how big the pages were, like the physical size of the pages is almost twice the size of a traditional page. The proportions are different, but it's essentially, it's an enormous piece of paper. And I knew the density of the story because I had seen, what had come before. And so I had plotted out a certain amount of time for this project to take, and it ended up doubling that. And that was not just because it's dense, it's because there were sort of long breaks in between blocks of script coming through. Editorial weren't necessarily keeping me in the loop of everyone's schedule, so that kind of threw me out a bit.
Yeah.
There were sort of projects that I could have, like sort of small projects that I could have taken on if I knew breaks were coming, but I never knew that breaks were coming. So that was a bit of a drag. Because I hate having nothing to do and twiddling my thumbs. So, originally Greg and I had been planning to start up on Black Magick like April or May last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working on Historia until October. November? No, October. Oh, fuck, I've forgotten. I think it might have been November. Like we were like right down to the line. Yeah. Oh, well past. Well past.
Oh my gosh.
And, at some point last year, Greg and I had sort of said, okay, well, let's book him for the beginning of this year. And I was like, great. And he was deep in a work hole at the time. And I was also like, I need to scramble to do some fast work because this had been sort of really loaded work. I need something that will move faster. So I sort of let DC know, hey, anything going at the moment, thinking that they'll give me a fill-in issue or something. And they were like, here, have a new series. And I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do a monthly. But here I am doing a monthly for a while, Fucking hell. So much goddamn work. But, it's another fucking team book.
Right.
But I do love team books. I've become a reliable team book artist for DC because I started on team books and kind of stayed on them for most of my time there.
Yeah. And so I have to ask, because I'm thinking to myself, like, I've talked to Michael Lark, of course, but I was like, all I do is talk to Greg. And I realized I'm like, I never ask people, what's it like to collaborate with Greg?
Right. He's
like
really collaborative. Yeah. Well, I find Greg really collaborative. I know, like, I'm sure I've heard Phil say that his first really collaborative experience of working on a book was working with Kelly Sue on Historia. Mm-hmm. I think that's why it was it was a part of the reason why it was so investing for him.
Yes.
Was because he sort of had this relationship that was just so dynamic and interesting with Kelly Sue.
Yeah.
I've been kind of lucky in that my first gig at DC was working with Gail Simone. And she's sort of a different kind of collaborative. She's sort of always saying to me, what do you want to draw? What do you want to see? What do you want to add? What do you want? And then sort of happily, sort of taking that information and using it one way or another, forming it into something. But, I'm also sort of a good team player and we'll just sort of say, oh, I like this and I like that, do with that whatever you play. But her scripts are quite sparse. She's concerned with character dynamics and dialogue. Mm-hmm. So, there isn't a lot of information in terms of sort of context of these things,
Right.
She's not trying to tell you what to draw. Mm-hmm. So that kind of scripting is a lot of fun because it leaves a lot of creativity to you. It's like, how do I want to interpret this?
Yeah.
And, a lot of the books that she and I worked on together with Birds of Prey and Secret Six, there's a lot of reason and opportunity to put in a lot of visual information that isn't necessary but feeds the story. You know, she quite likes, you know, some very subversive comedy, especially when we were working on Secret Six. You know, she was like, at the time, there were so few girls in the industry, so few women in the industry, and certainly not in editorial, certainly not in creative.
Yeah.
And she was like, we're a couple of women that have a book all to ourselves that's essentially sex, drugs, and rock and roll. No one's paying attention because we had like 5 editors over the space of 3 issues or something. It was kind of crazy. And while, you know, a small but mighty and passionate readership of Secret Six was very happy, it wasn't a sort of general reader's book. You know, people who were sort of reading Justice League and Superman weren't necessarily reading Secret Six. So we were just like, let's do whatever the fuck we want. Yeah. And it sort of meant that I could sort of throw in all kinds of subversive visual gags that were just for she and I to have a laugh about. You know, whatever readers on her, you know, forum, you know, this is all pre-social media. So we're just like, let's fucking do this. So it was, that was a lot of fun. And so that was collaborative. Working with Greg is the most collaborative I've ever been because even though I tend to sort of, you know, I have a social battery that needs recharging and I just want to be left alone to do my job. Yeah. In between issues, at the beginning of an arc, I'm more of a talker than I am a writer. So it's like if we're communicating through email or text or whatever, I'm reasonably terse because I'm dyslexic and it's just I can't fulfill how I feel. So I'm just going to give you the basic information. And at some point, hopefully we'll talk. And then when we're talking, I'll just yabber on, as you can see. And so, you know, he and I talk for ages. And certainly the first time we sort of, we'd only met each other maybe 4 or 5 times before I went over to their place in Portland to stay for a week. Okay. And it was a very loaded emotional time. There'd sort of been a family loss, like a tragedy happened like the day I was arriving. It was pretty full on. And I was like, you know, I really don't need to be here if you guys need to sort of be a family. And they were like, no, breath of fresh air, please come in and you know, lighten the mood. And so this family of people that I didn't really know that well, but I was saying to my husband at the time, it was like, Greg and I feel like we really know each other well, but we haven't kind of earned any of that feeling. It's just instinctively there. By the end of that week, it was like, no, we've earned that feeling, you know. And as my husband has described us, we're like brother and sister, Greg and I. You know, we're sort of squabbling. We're like siblings. We're squabbling all the time, but sort of talking excitedly about some things and just absolutely, no, fuck that. I like this, you know, about other things. You know, when we finally got to work on Wonder Woman together, we've been talking about Diana for a decade, you know, just long amoebus conversations. And when we finally got to do year 1 together, it was like, oh God, this is happening. We're doing this. And he said, how do you see this? You know, how, you know, we need to be on the same page. We understand that we understand Diana in the same way.
Right.
But now we have a very specific structure. We have 6 issues of 20 pages an issue, 120 pages to do what we want to do. What do you want to do? What's important to you? And we were on the same page about the same things, you know, how we saw Steve Trevor, because at the time, Steve, this is before the movie had come out. Right. So at the time, Steve had been sort of, you know, abandoned as a love interest, tried to be shoehorned back in as a love interest. He was a bit of a douchebag. He was kind of a bit of a womanizer sometimes. He was kind of a bit of, you know, it was sort of, how do we see this guy? And we were like, no, this is how he needs to be. Yes. Okay. Agree. This is how we need to do this. This is how we need to do that. Yeah. But, you know, I could say something like, I know you think this is really stupid, but I love the invisible jet. And here is how we're going to justify it. This is what it is. And, you know, Greg's initial reaction to me saying the invisible jet was like, oh, fuck, no, God damn it, no. And I was like, let me sell it to you. And so I had to sort of say, you know, Steve arrives in a plane. That's it. That's the plane. They just fix it together. The island is invisible to outside. So we just, whatever magic is used to make the island invisible, we make the plane invisible. And she doesn't need to know how to fly it. This fucking race is magical. We can just, all they need to do is send it back where it came from. Go back home, kind of thing. It'll fly itself. And then it can just, break up when it arrives. Whatever we need to do, we just need to get it in there somewhere. And he was like, oh, great, that's great. And so we had a lot of fun with that. And it's like, it's barely relevant to the story that we're telling, but it does get them from the island back to
I remember
San Diego.
And I love that now I have this backstory where Greg, because I was like, oh yeah, I can see Greg going, no. And now that I've gotten to speak to you, I can see your excitement.
To feel real. And I'm like, yeah, I like things to feel real too, but I also like that there is a magic quality to this race of people.
Right.
And I also like the goofiness of that. And, she's a character that can fly, but at the time we had decided that she wasn't going to be superpowered because we both wanted to do the competition. The competition is an important part of her lore, but she also can't be superpowered during that because otherwise she's cheating, even if she doesn't know. And so her powers need to be blessed to her after she's been in the competition. So how's she going to get to the island? How are they going to leave the island? He was like, yeah, okay, fine. And, it's really sort of glossed over, nothing's ever explained. It's just kind of there in the background as the Amazons are putting the plane back together.
Greg too, right? Because it's like, we don't want to have to explain everything to the audience. Like, give them some credit, right? Give them
give them a sense of magic, give them a sense of being able to put the pieces together. What does this mean?
Yeah.
Give them something to think about.
I love it. I love the sibling analogy, and that I can see it all now, and it's all come together. And I've been, like I said, I've been dying to talk to you and stuff, but I've been blessed to have Greg in my life for so many reasons. But you and I were talking off air, and we're talking about the AAPI history bill that I'm working on that's taking up like all of my life. But I always credit, actually Greg for kind of getting me started in activism and social justice work, because I'm a huge fan of Lazarus, and he was nice enough to like give me snippets of things. And then I actually communicated with him a little bit on social, and he replied, and it was like really encouraging. And so, he's why I have this headache right now with this AAB.
Right.
I just kidding.
It's all Greg's fault.
It's all Greg's fault. Yeah. No, but I do I have such an affection for him for so many reasons, but it's clearly one of them. But I love to hear that, because like I said, I've only gotten to talk to Michael once because he's so busy and he's not big on jumping on. But like, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to ask Nicola like the flip side of everything, because I always get to hear how awesome you are, everybody is to work with. But so this is a lot of fun. But our time is ending, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll be able to chat again sometime soon when I'm not in a crazy legislative session. Thank you for educating me so thoroughly on Wonder Woman Historia. I feel like, wow, I have to go back and read it right now. Like, I want to go read it right now.
Great.
So I can get all the themes and just kind of capture everything that we kind of talked about. But this is such a joy, and I can't believe it, but I'm actually going to see you in person too in a few months.
Right. In a few months. I can't wait. It's so exciting.
And we can go knock on Greg's door together and be like, we're here.
Oh, you bet. I'm sure I'm going to stay there at least a couple of nights. I hope
there
so.
You go.
Let me in, Greg. Let me in.
Jen will let you in. And Marlo.
Yeah, she will.
Just bring Marlo some snacks and you'll be good to go. So, it's going to be awesome. We will absolutely talk some more, not just on the podcast, but I'm around. This Australia time thing is a real loop for me, though. I'm like, whoa, what time is it there? I'm so confused. I am not good at time zones. So
I have it drilled into my head now. I've been working with Americans for 20 years now, 23 years now. So I have it really drilled in. I know when you guys are in daylight savings and when we're not.
Wow.
How that changes everything. Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm in awe, because let me tell you, I had to go online and find a converter to make sure I gave you the right time, because I'm so messed up in the head with the time.
It's in your iPhone. Just put in world clock.
Yes.
And it'll tell you what's what.
Yes, yes. I was just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to schedule this? I don't want to mess it up. But next time I do, I definitely want to hear more also kind of like how you got started in that journey, because it's so fascinating to me, and just how like comics and art transcends across nations, which is also something that's I need to hold on to, because I need a lot of inspiration being where I live right now and the world that I'm living in and the state that I'm living in. So we can talk about that more next time. But
oh, good luck. And let everybody know that the event that we're talking about where we're all going to be together is Rose City Comic Con. So in September, Rose City Comic Con, all of the Historia creative team are going to be together.
Yes, thank you for that.
Doing a bunch of events for Historia. So
absolutely.
Make it one of your destination conventions this year.
It's going to be epic. It's absolutely going to be epic. So it is September 23, 24, that weekend. So come on out to Portland, Rose City Comic Con, not just for Historia. It's like the mecca of so many amazing creators.
It's a great show.
It's great. So thank you so much, Nicola. It was so amazing
Mimi,
to meet
thank you so much for having me.
Finally talk to you.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.